This week, we are not the only people having this conversation. Menopause experts from around the world are meeting in Berlin, where they'll be discussing some of the questions and difficulties raised in that piece. Let's speak now to Professor Lesley Regan, who's the president of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists. Morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to speak to you. And we're really trying to sort of start a conversation here. I came to this and there were so many things I did not know. Is there, do you think, a sort of fundamental lack of access to information out there?
Yes, I think this remains a really taboo subject, despite the fact that almost all women go through this phase of life. And one of the things that we're really trying to do now at the RCOG, in partnership with the Women's Health Task Force that I co-chair with Jackie Doyle-Price, is to try and make information easily accessible and really comprehensive for women. So if you give them information, information's power, and they will be able to cope.
Sally was talking in there about conversation amongst friends, amongst family. What about sort of education in schools? Is that an area where you'd like to see expansion?
Well, I think in schools we need to explain to girls and boys exactly what's happening through their reproductive lives. And it's important for them to understand about the onset of periods and contraception and reproduction and pregnancy, and then also that women are now going to go through a menopause, usually at the age of 51 in this country.
One of the things we've heard when we've talked about this before is not just about information, but it's also access to treatment. It's access to support from doctors. Some people saying that they have to go to different options, perhaps end up paying privately. What's going on here, and should there be more availability of treatments, of knowledge?
Well, I think as a menopausal woman and also as a gynaecologist, I'd like all women to be able to access good, high-quality care. But I think the most likely chance of them achieving that is if they have really good information and they really understand the problem. So one of the commitments I've made in my last 6 months as president, together with Jackie Doyle-Price, who co-chairs the Women's Health Task Force, is to try and make the NHS website the very, very best place to access good, high-quality care. There's masses of information out there, wonderful organisations, like you've mentioned, doing all sorts of fabulous things, but we need to get it all into one place so that really comprehensive coverage of this really, really common and easily treatable problem.
I asked this question quite ignorantly, I think. In terms of the symptoms, how much of a variation is there? Because you were talking about sort of the things that specifically affect you.
Well, there are lots of different symptoms, and I think it's, if we generalise, some women have mild symptoms, some have medium symptoms, and some have very severe symptoms. But I don't think they need to have symptoms at all if they don't wish to. And there are treatments that are available to them if they wish to have them.
The thing that I've also discovered, because I've done quite a lot for this week, is that this is all so individual, and there seems to be, some people don't suffer at all, which is fantastic, but it does come down to every single individual is different. Is there enough time in a GP appointment to get that information to make sure that treatments are individualised?
I think GPs do a wonderful job, but as you say, they are very, very pushed by masses and masses of different demands, which again is why I want to get the NHS website to be a really fantastic place for women to go to and for doctors to go to too, in order to access really good quality care. And as you pointed out, because the symptoms are so variable and so individualised or personalised, there'll be different solutions for different women.
Let me read you some of these comments, because we've got loads of them coming in. Jane says, thanks for covering this subject. I've worked in a male-dominated engineering environment for nearly 40 years and was really embarrassed when I started feeling menopausal symptoms. I tried HRT, but it turned me into a bit of a monster, so came off it and decided instead to just be open about it, which has been very liberating. Jill says, I'm 72 years old. I'm finally through the other side, she says. I've noticed in the last few weeks that I now feel cold, which she says is a mixed blessing. And finally, Kate says, I was working in the city as an assistant to 10 fund managers and salesmen until the age of 52. It's a very busy place, so started getting symptoms. I was embarrassed. For 4 years, I hardly slept. The hot flushes and the mood swings were pretty awful, and commuting was terrible, especially during the summer. She says, women get a raw deal. In the past, we've had to suffer in silence. Thank goodness things are changing. I'm now 64. I escaped from the city and London and live in rural Wales now. So happy. No periods or PMT, no hot flushes. There is light at the end of the tunnel, ladies.
I mean, that's the message that lots of people give, that it will be over. Other people asking, when do you know it's over?
Well, I think, again, it's very individual for different women. But what I'd like to pick up is Dan's point about feeling very isolated in a male working environment. And it's a really important point, because women are 51% of the population, 44% of the workforce, and we know that about 1 in 3 women over the age of 50 in the workforce is inconvenienced by symptoms that they feel they can't talk about because it remains a taboo subject. But my experience is that when you talk to employers about can you provide cool air conditioning, options for women to go away, that they're very receptive. I was talking to a group of fund managers last week, all male, who said, well, I didn't know about it, and now that you've told me about it, let's put it on the agenda. So I think people will be receptive if we talk about it openly.
And we are indeed. There are so many different, there are so many different symptoms, and there are lots of different treatments as well. I mean, what about from your experience? There, as we said already, there is no one catch-all, but there are alternative, lots of different treatments. What would you say to people to look at?
Look at exercise, lifestyle changes, think about hormone replacement therapy. It's not the bad thing that's been portrayed for so long. I think now we're realising that this is also, all these treatments are trying to improve women's longevity and quality of life. It's not about just living longer, it's about living well. And remember that my generation of women is the first, or rather I'm the first generation of women that's lived longer, or will live longer I hope, as a postmenopausal woman than I was reproductive. And that's a really very important change in society, and one that I think we've really got to cope with really proactively and sensibly, and hence that's why I'm absolutely committed to getting all this information out there.
And you talked there about hormone replacement therapy, because some people can't, but some people can't take that, can they, for medical reasons? So it's really important, isn't it, to have a conversation, not just with your friends, etc., but with a doctor as well.
Exactly. Yes, and there's lots and lots and lots of different alternatives. So just because one thing doesn't suit you, don't think, oh, well, I can't have any help. Go and find something else. And then, of course, if you've got a list of things, of information about this, you're going to be much, much better prepared to go and find the right thing that's going to suit you.
Thank you so much for coming in and talking about some of these things today. I must confess, when I was told last week that we're doing an entire week on the menopause, I was thinking, how's it all going to work? But in actual fact, thank you. But also, so many people are getting in contact with questions, with things they're worried about, with concerns, and just sort of sharing
everyone wants information.
Exactly,
and men also can have issues, can't they, when hormones change as well?
And I'm sure they do very, very well to know about all of this. It's going to make them much, much nicer people.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And as you say, you're really working on that NHS website. When do you think it will change? When do you think it'll be available?
Well, I hope we can get it up and running in the next year.
In the next year. OK. Thank you very much indeed. It's great to talk to you. And, of course, we are talking about it throughout this week. Very specifically, tomorrow we are looking at HRT. And just briefly on HRT, because there were concerns some time ago. So what would you say about HRT and concerns around it? I think it's really, really sad that so many women have been denied HRT in the past because of 2 studies that I think misrepresented the medical potential complications. Yeah. Having reanalysed them, we now know that in fact many of those women were in groups that were not could have benefited, but the way the data was analysed was not optimal. So many people have missed out. Many people.